Hey guys, I'm Ryan,
And I'm Katie.
and you're listening to The List. Thanks for joining us as we go over IMDb's top 100 films of all time, the ultimate list, to let you know whether they are worth being put on your bucket list or your chuck it list. Maybe that won't be terrible editing. I had
I'm
like
gonna
four strokes trying to get through that intro
I'm
there.
gonna for the first time ever post that as a blooper
A
reel.
blooper reel? Yeah, you should, for sure. Well, today we are talking about, well, I'm going to call this next several episodes of our podcast the Summer of War.
Yeah, or the summer of sadness. I got that summertime sadness.
So don't tune out because that's not the greatest intro for a podcast.
This has
It's,
been a
it's going to
really
be sad.
sad couple of movies that we've watched, and they were very difficult for me to get through.
Yeah, well, we're talking about several war movies in the next coming episodes, and this one is no exception. And let's just jump into it.
Well, you looked at me and you were like, "How are you going to handle Saving Private Ryan?" Which I've never seen, and I was like, "Oh gosh."
Well, that one's not for a long ways away, but
Yeah.
yeah. But we just recently watched All Quiet on the Western Front, the 1930s version directed by Louis Milestone. There is a 2022 version of this movie on Netflix, which I did watch also. Katie, I don't think you did.
No, I was done. After the first movie, I did not want to feel that way again. And I'm not saying whether it was good or bad. I just had reached my limit of pain.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you the vibes on these two movies were completely different to me. Still
Can I
some
ask?
still some sadness, but
Yeah.
uh, very different vibes. So let's jump into a summary. This movie is set in 1914 Germany, and it involves a handful of German youth who eagerly enlist in World War One, but their enthusiasm quickly wanes as they experience firsthand the horrors of war. I think that's a pretty good summary.
Yeah,
It's
it's a
kind of
great summary.
generalized, but it follows a group of friends who were all in school together and their experience in World War One. I got a couple facts for this movie. Number one is it won 2 Academy Awards. It was the first picture actually to win Best Picture and Best Director together at the Oscars.
Nice.
It was nominated for some others, but those are the only 2 that it won. This movie is based on a book.
I read half of it, actually. I
Did
didn't
you
get to
really?
finish it, but I did. Yeah. I read half of it.
Is it as sad as the
It
movie?
is quite literally the movie.
Oh,
I
really?
was so surprised how much of it was the same. It was amazingly, the first half at least was.
Was very, very accurate to the
It was
movie.
almost like a truncated version of the movie. Like it was much less detailed, but exactly the same thing. Like there were scenes in the movie that were scenes in the book. I'm always surprised by that because movies often take such a different direction, but it was very similar.
Okay. Yeah, and the novel is by German novelist Erich Maria Remarque.
Mm-hmm.
I probably butchered that, but sorry, I don't speak German. And this
Well,
movie,
I'm 25% Polish, but I also don't speak German.
25%, good. $1.2 million budget for this movie in 1930.
Yeah.
There's a lot of explosions. There's a lot of other stuff. We'll talk about that. But really high budget for a movie of that time. And this movie stars, basically to me, there's really one star in this movie. It's Lou Ayres, who played the character of Paul.
Paul.
I guess there's a couple other ones, but he's the most notable one. And we'll get into him a little bit later. But this movie, the anti-war message for this movie kind of resonated so strongly with Lou Ayres. And so when he was actually drafted into World War II, he became a conscientious objector And America was so outraged with him that they threatened not to show any of his movies in the theaters anymore. But eventually he did go, but he requested to be put in the medical corps, so he didn't have to take any lives. And he was accepted and served under fire in the South Pacific.
I don't blame him in the slightest. I think the attitude around that has changed significantly, and I fully understand why he would object and not want anything to do with it. So I get it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we could get into that a little bit. I mean,
we don't have to.
World War I and World War II are completely different wars than we've had ever in history. And I guess some people would consider those the good wars. Right?
Yeah.
Like something that we had really
reason,
like strong reason to enter and to fight for.
Like a genocide was happening. I understand World War II. I get why they needed people to fight and why it was an important war to fight. But still, I understand at the personal level too of being like, I don't know that I can take somebody's life. So I get it.
Yeah, it's something hopefully a lot of our listeners and we'll never have to do.
Yeah.
So be thankful for the sacrifices that came before you, for sure.
Right.
Let's jump into this movie. What do you think about the story? Tell me about the story.
So the first thing that happens is the movie opens up on a classroom of young boys. I mean, they're not 12-year-olds, but they're nearing
they're about to
adulthood.
finish high school, basically.
Yeah, they're nearing
not
adulthood.
Yeah. Not
There's this
20s, but young.
Yeah. There's this Professor Kantorek who is giving this really impassioned speech where he's basically like, you're a coward if you're not going to go and fight for your country. Don't you want to fight for your country? Don't you want to be a hero? Don't you want to fight for the motherland? And in the book, it even says, even your parents would call you a coward. Like that's what the climate was like at the time. So
they paint this very romanticized version of
you're going to be a
and
hero.
I think that's the one that most of us have who've never experienced something like that.
Right. So
it's all about glory and honor and
duty to your country.
And it is to some respect, right? But there's a lot more than that.
But I would like to point out that he was saying this all from the comfort of the front of the classroom, knowing he would never be the one going to war, like these young men who had a whole life ahead of them.
I feel like he just didn't want to teach the rest of the semester. So he was like, if I can get all these boys to enlist, I can just...
Yeah, so he was giving this really impassioned speech, and most of the boys were riled up by it and wanted to go, but there was at least one who was like, I don't think I want to do that. And they were like,
come on,
you're coming. We're going to do this. We're going to do it together. And they really do have this air of excited youthfulness about what's to come. So they are assigned to the second company, and they're assigned to Sergeant Himmelstoss, who is their mailman back home, and a really nice, amenable man who they all knew. And when they see him, they're like, what's up? It's our mailman. And he's like, excuse me? And it turns out to be the most rigorous, horrible leader on the field. And it just is already a peek into how war changes you. And so they have a really rough time of it. They're under attack before they even get to where they're supposed to be going. And they meet the older veterans who are already there and hardened by war. And that's where they meet Kat, who becomes a really important part of this story. He's stolen a hog for them to eat, and he's trading tobacco, like their stuff that they brought in. So already seeing that there's not even enough food to eat, and the only way you're going to get it is by trading the stuff you brought in. And also, are we going to turn out like these guys who have no hope or life in them? And then they go off on their first mission. One of them dies, and more are injured, and it's a wake-up call that this is not the heroic dream they thought it was going to be. And they have this really interesting scene at the kitchen. I don't know what to say. At this point where they come up to the guy who's been cooking all day and their half of their company is dead. And instead of being like, oh man, half your company is dead, that's so heartbreaking, he's like, I cooked for double the amount of people. You wasted my time. And they're all like, what? And so it's just
And he's like, I'm gotta throw away all this extra food. And they're like, no,
we're gonna eat that food because they're
almost
starving.
Incite a riot. Yeah.
Yeah. And anyway, they another kind of wake up call for them. It's like they're constantly being bombarded by the reality, much like they're being bombarded constantly by artillery and being attacked. So they kind of settle into this new normal. They keep dying left and right. There's the scene where one of their friends is dying and he has this really nice pair of boots. And one of the core group, all he can think about is, I got to get my hands on those boots. And so I think that's kind of the turning point where they go from these starry-eyed young men to starting to get hardened by what they're going through, because he knows how much it hurts to walk without a good pair of boots. And his friend is dying right in front of him. And all he can think is, I got to get those boots. It's basically just a story about kids going to war and never being the same again. And to that point, there's this very interesting scene where Paul goes home. And he's so happy to go home. He's so happy for a break. But then he shows up there and he's like, I don't belong here. The old men, much like the teacher in the beginning who told them, go to war, you're a hero. All the old men left behind are like, here's what you're supposed to do.
This and this.
Yeah.
You would end the war here.
We could win the
And
war.
He's like, you have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, you don't know what you're talking about.
And he realizes that they have no clue the harrowing things that they've seen, and he has no place at home anymore. It's so bad that he leaves and goes back to war early just to get away from that feeling of not belonging. So all in all, a really heart-wrenching story about boys becoming men way too early and never being the same again. I would give it a 9.5 out of 10 story-wise.
Yeah, so the thing I thought that was kind of interesting and about this film, story-wise, and I kind of mentioned it when I just said Paul was really the only character. In this version of the film, he is even less of a character than the 2022 version.
Yeah.
In the 2022 version, there's more connection with characters. At least Paul and Kat, anyway. This one, and I think it's done intentionally.
I think so
in this
too.
one, is that they're just boots with a rifle. They are literally fodder
Yeah.
for this war. And that's why you don't really get too attached to most of them. Even though, they're all friends and stuff like that. It's just, you just see people dying right and left all over the place. In this horrific trench war that basically didn't, like, if you look at it, how much ground was gained over that period of war, it was basically none.
Yeah.
And millions of people died
For nothing.
for nothing. And that's kind of what
they wanted power.
That's kind of what this whole movie, I think, is kind of showing us, is that all this life and the innocence of these young men, and literally towards the end of the war, I mean, they have like 15, 16-year-old boys who
I think maybe
are
even younger than that.
probably, who have lied to, be able to get enlisted, are killed or massacred, basically.
Well, I
and
don't mean to interrupt, but I did want to say, when Paul goes back home, he goes to visit the professor that led him to enlist, and he's doing the exact same thing, but those boys are maybe 14. I don't even know that they're 14.
They're a lot younger.
He's riling them up, and Paul says, it's nothing like that. We're dying.
Yeah, the professor's like, come on, tell them how good it is out there.
Yeah, and he's like, it's horrible.
Like, I can't do that.
No, I won't lead you to go out there. And the kids are like, you're a coward.
Yeah. And they kind of boo him out.
And it's just
The
heartbreaking.
place. Yeah. So, I mean, in that aspect, it's a really interesting story because there's not really characters that you get attached emotionally to. But I think it's done intentionally just to re-emphasize that they're just boots with a rifle. And so in that way, it's really kind of a depressing.
Desolate.
But there's some scenes in there that are really, really poignant that I remember. You've touched on some of the ones, especially in the beginning. It's interesting that the newer versions does not have those scenes
Where they're getting riled up.
where they're getting riled up and stuff like that. There's not an emphasis on those scenes in the newer ones. But there's a stark contrast in this film too that I thought they did really nicely, where it's all happy, kind of happy-go-lucky for the first half of the film. You know, lots of smiles, lots of bright eyes, and then it just spirals down and down and down, to the very end. And I will say the ending in this book, or in this movie, and the ending in the newer version is different, very different. There's a lot of different stuff.
In the end of this movie, I feel like it basically was saying there's no hope. Like, hope is gone, hope is lost, war has ruined all. Is that what you feel like? What do you feel like is the ending of the 2023 one? 22?
Well, I think that's kind of the same as well.
Yeah, just in a different way. Okay.
It's done differently. But I remember when we finished this film and it just goes to blackout. Like, you just see graves and dead bodies as far as the eye can see, and it just blacks out. Like, we just sat in silence for, I don't know
a
how
while.
long. It had to have been at least 5 minutes. We just sat there.
I can't remember the last time I sat in silence in my life.
I've never. Me too. No,
but I was struck.
I've never seen a movie like I feel like I haven't seen a lot of war movies, but I've seen a pretty good number of war. I've never seen a movie like this, a war movie like this. It shook me a little bit.
Me too.
Honestly. So the story-wise, story-wise, yeah, I'm going to give it about a 9.
I think what ups the score for me to that 9.5 is how weird to choose the Germans.
Yeah, it's weird because you're seeing it from their point of view. And it's because it's written by a German novelist.
Yeah.
But still, you
adapt the movie into what you want it to be. To still stick with the Germans is just weird. They're the bad guys.
Yeah.
Like, it's a weird choice, and it worked. It still worked. And I think that further proves the point. It just humanizes even the enemy and still makes it seem so desolate and useless.
Yeah,
anyway.
Well, and then there's that one scene in the movie.
I know what you're talking about.
Where he's
already.
in a foxhole with a French soldier. I won't spoil that for you guys if you want to watch that, but that's a really poignant scene. That one's probably even more poignant in the newer version, but both are
that scene messed me up.
Very horrific, humanizing and dehumanizing moment in the film.
Tough watch, for sure.
What about the acting?
The acting was weird to me for one reason. Why were they Americans?
What?
I don't
I mean, it's filmed in
understand.
America. Well, the newer version's all in German.
Yeah, well, so like either make the decision, like it just doesn't. I I guess it's like in a play that you have at your local community theater. You're not going to have people try to do like a French accent. You're
Yeah.
going to talk like you usually talk. But it threw me off for the first like 30 minutes of the movie. I'm like, aren't they supposed to be German?
Yeah, yeah.
Why do they sound like they're from the Midwest
Let me just
of
say,
America?
the acting is bad. I didn't even think it was good. Not,
I
well,
don't know that it was bad.
most of the people.
Yeah, Paul was
there's-
great.
There were some good moments, and there was some really, like, not cheesy, but just not good acting.
I don't feel like the acting was bad, but I don't
did.
feel like it was
I think
great.
that was the weakest point of the film. But I
Yeah.
think it was supposed to be
Yeah. So,
because the emphasis was on other things and not really
Right.
the acting. Like I said, there's not really a true character
no.
to follow. It's just I don't even know what to say. It's just there's not really a true character to
The
follow.
character is the war.
Basically.
I mean, it is. The character in this movie is the war
Mm-hmm.
and how it's eating all these children alive.
Yeah, I would
But-
I would probably only rank the acting like 5.
I would probably
I
give
hate to
it.
say that. It's probably better than that, but if I have to average everybody, it's like 5.
I'd probably give it like a 6.5. Again, I was so thrown by the fact that they were all Americans. I shouldn't have been that thrown. Actually, no, I'm going to change my mind. I feel like there were enough scenes in this movie that were like I'm changing. I'm changing up to an 8. There were enough scenes in this movie, like when they were trapped down under, while there was heavy fire, they were in the foxholes that are covered. I don't know what to call those in the dirt,
In the trenches.
in the
Yeah.
trenches,
They
but
dug little
inside,
spots to sleep
yeah.
and stuff like that. Yeah.
where one soldier like slipped into a psychosis, like he couldn't stop
Yeah, he
freaking
started
out.
panicking and those are the scenes I thought were good,
Yeah.
but it was just in the in between
Yeah.
that brought it down for me. So I maybe I was a little harsh, 6 and
Yeah, I think I'm actually going to stick with an 8 and say while the acting was not the shining point nor the focus of this movie, there was enough well done acting for me to still feel touched and impressed. When Paul goes home,
Paul
there's
and
a lot of
Kat
great
are
acting.
are the big stars.
Kat
of
was
this
great.
film. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not like appalled by the acting or anything. I feel like
No.
it could have been better. I agree with
Yeah.
you that it could have been better. And I also agree with you that it's not the point of the movie. But I'm going to settle at an 8. And you're
Okay.
sticking with a 6.
I'm probably gonna stay with a 6.
Okay.
But there's some really shining moments, but there's the in between and the little fill-in characters and stuff. I just wasn't
Enough to
super
drag it down.
impressed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I understand that.
Cinematography.
The cinematography was crazy impressive.
I agree.
Yeah, especially for how old it was. Like the director had a very clear view of what he wanted to happen and what he wanted to get across in the cinematography, and he succeeded. I don't know how they managed to get some of the shots they did, but it was truly impressive.
I was stunned at the number of explosions in
Yeah.
this movie. That's why I was like, the budget for this film had to
Crazy.
be huge. The number of extras. They did a really good job of, especially the first part of the movie where it was like really glossy and pretty and the lighting was nice, to bringing it down when they were in the trenches and in war. I thought they did that really well. The other thing that made this movie, there was actually, there was some really for a 1930s movie. There's
Yeah.
pretty
It was innovative.
gory moments. There's a moment where an explosion goes off and you just see hands hanging on some barbed wire. I bet that was like really mind blowing to some people watching the film.
Yeah,
in
so this
1930.
movie was filmed pre-Hays Code. So there was no restriction on what they could show, and they felt that it was an important enough movie to allow the gore to be on screen.
Yeah,
And That scene that you're talking about was told to the director. That actually is something someone saw happen.
Yeah, oh, I'm sure.
And
I'm
he
sure.
told the director about it, and the director put it in the movie.
I'm sure. There, and then the other thing about this movie that makes it crazy is the lack of a score.
Yeah.
It is so creepy. Like,
Yeah.
not creepy, but just depressing. The only thing you hear in this movie is the shell of, artillery shells. Constant gunfire. It is never ending throughout the entire film until the very end. It does not stop. And it is so depressing. And I can see why people went nuts in
Yeah.
the trenches and stuff, just hearing that night and day, not being able to sleep. Like, that was just the normal sounds of life. It's crazy.
Yeah, the director said he didn't want to take away from the seriousness of the movie, so he wasn't going to add any music.
Yeah.
And I guess some theaters, because at this time, they would have live orchestras playing in the theaters, they added music to it, and he was really upset about it.
Oh, really?
It was intentional that it was so quiet,
Yeah.
and you just heard what was happening on the field.
They do a really good job in the newer version of doing that. There is a score though, but it's really nice when there's a ceasefire, and then it is complete silence.
Yeah.
You can hear the wind rushing through the trees. You can hear birds starting to sing again. But they did that really nicely in this one. But and I think because there was no score, it gave a completely different feel from the newer movie. It made it much more serious and much more impactful.
Yeah, I mean, I think music gives people hope. Music, music is going to tell you how to feel about a movie. And I think he did not want any barrier or buffer between you and the war. You were really supposed to feel it.
Yeah, so cinematography score for me is way up there. 9.7.
Wow. Mine's just a flat 9, but I was
Okay.
very impressed.
Yeah, I think cinematography is really great.
Especially the last scene. I don't know. Some people may think it's cheesy, but I didn't. I was really touched by it.
No, it's not at all.
No.
Not at all. No, it was super impactful.
Yeah.
Done beautifully. What about wow factor?
I think the wow factor for me is how the director was able to get across. I don't know. I don't feel like this was really a time where people were really talking about the futility that can come with war. So first off, what a brave thing to do. And secondly, I think just the way he managed to get across the feeling of like no hope, and the way he managed to capture the path from innocence to ruination in all of these kids' lives, and still managed to show you the people back home who had no idea. That was us, right? We didn't know what war did to people. I mean, I think kind of, but a movie like this tells you without holding back. This is the kind of stuff that people who go to war for your country go through and feel. And I just think it was so impactful and so well done. And my wow factor is a 10.
Yeah, my wow factor is this movie. Like I said, I've never seen a movie like this before. Never seen one that makes you feel the horrors of war like this movie does. And it's not gory like other modern day, except for that one scene. And I wouldn't even say that's super gory, compared to what we see in a average television show
true.
now. But it's just the feeling and the never-ending weight that this movie has. that is, I can't really describe it. It's just something that has to be experienced. And it's a 10. Oh, is this movie a top 100 movie of all time?
Yeah.
I think so too. I agree. Top 100. Is this movie a bucket list movie?
Yeah. I think everybody should watch this movie. I literally think everyone should watch this movie. It's a must see for everyone just because of how impactful it'll be on your view of life and more. Do you think it's a top 100 movie?
Yeah, it's a top 100.
You don't think it's a bucket list movie?
I didn't say that. You didn't ask me.
Do you think it's a bucket list?
Yes, it is a bucket list movie. This is a movie that every person should watch in their lifetime. There's films that are enjoyable. So this is gonna be crazy because this is I'm saying this is a bucket list movie, but I'm not putting it on my top 10.
Yeah, no.
Which doesn't make any sense. I know.
It does make sense. I'm not putting it on mine.
But there's movies that are enjoyable, and then there's movies that are impactful. This one is impactful, not necessarily enjoyable, but it's important. It's an important film. And so I think because of that, it's a bucket list movie.
I agree.
Because of that, though, it's not a movie I'm going to watch over and over again for enjoyment. I may watch this one other time, but I need some time away from it.
I was surprised you even watched the new version.
It struck me so hard.
I couldn't handle it.
The new version is not as heavy.
I just didn't want to risk it even.
Yeah. The new one's
raw.
not as heavy. It's definitely more gory. It's definitely more character oriented. I'll tell you that scene in the foxhole with the French soldier. Oh, in the new one is so sad, and then the ending is very sad too, but in a different way. But because it's so character centered, they break up the seriousness with little moments of respite.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
This movie does not do that.
I was thinking earlier, this movie has no romance to give you hope. It has there's nothing in between.
Not really. I mean, there's a little scene where they go.
Yeah, that's just war life, though. I feel like there's nothing in this movie to hold on to as a thread of hope. It's just pure misery. Yeah. But there's art that moves you, and there's art that changes and shapes you. And this is both. This is art that changes and shapes you. I'm not saying it didn't move me, but was not enjoyable. It affected me. It molded me. And I think that makes it a bucket list movie. Yeah.
Yeah. Go watch it. Let us know what your thoughts are, because it's a good movie.
Yeah.
It's a good movie.
Even as sad as it was, and even though I'm saying I'd never watch it again, I would absolutely watch it for the first time, if that makes sense.
And
I would never take back watching it.
Everybody needs to watch it.
Yeah.
I would never. You should watch it. No, you need to watch it.
Yeah. I would never take back having watched it. I would just never put myself through it again. So even though we're saying it was hard to watch, it needed to be done. Mm-hmm. And I would, if I lost my memory, I would do it again.
When you watch the movie, you'll know exactly what we're talking about. If you don't understand now, after you get done watching it, you'll be like, I get it now. I get it. It's so hard to describe and explain, but you'll get it.
Yeah.
Go check it out.
Next week, we're going to be talking about The Deer Hunter with Robert De Niro and Christopher Walken. Yet another bright, sunshiny movie. Full of hope and peace.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one to talk about, I think.
Yeah, I think so too.
I don't know if I get it. We'll talk about it.
Yeah.
Anyway. Well, thanks for joining us.
I'm Ryan,
I'm Katie.
and this has been The List. Bye.